It's kind of surreal that we now live in a world where we can now legitimately refer to Final Fantasy VII as a Nintendo classic, something that is readily available on Nintendo hardware, ready for purchase and ready to play, just as good as it was when it first came out in '97. Now, the game may not have aged quite as well as some of its contemporaries. It's no Super Mario 64, it's no Ocarina of Time, it's no Super Smash Bros, it's no Banjo-Kazooie. It's not even as good as, like, you know, the old Super Nintendo RPGs, the Chrono Triggers, the Final Fantasy VIs, the Act Razors, but all in all, it's still a really, really fun, engaging, memorable RPG with a great story and characters. And I think that's the main thing that really sets Final Fantasy VII apart from those games, is that, like, this is a game that's able to tackle relatively strong topics in a way that doesn't seem forced or contrived, right? In a modern game, Cloud being forced into dressing in drag to infiltrate a brothel might come off as cringy or ridiculous, and I think it kind of does in the remake, but in this one, it's hilarious and memorable and something that, like, people look back fondly of. There are lots of moments like that in this where it comes off like they really, really could have botched it. It really could have come off as awkward or wrong in some way, but instead, it all comes together beautifully to create a very fun, memorable, engaging adventure about a group of people rebelling against a tyrannical super corporation, Shinra, that is using an energy source, Mako, to try and ruin the planet. Cloud Strife, the protagonist, doesn't necessarily care about the planet at first, but through the throughout the adventure, you can sort of get this feeling that he is growing closer to the people around him and legitimately becoming their close friends and allies, even though he is not quite what he believes himself to be. It's really interesting to see, like, to compare Final Fantasy VII, the pop culture phenomenon, versus the reality that is the game, because it's remarkable to me just how, like, all of the game's most poignant scenes aren't really discussed at all. Like, outside of maybe Aeris's death scene, people don't really discuss, you know, the humor of the game, right? They don't discuss, like, Cloud's background all that much. They don't discuss his relationship with Tifa, which is stunning, like, beautifully rendered. One of my favorite Final Fantasy couples, I think. Tifa is a great waifu, a great love interest for Cloud, very loyal, like a very admirable character. Love Tifa. Like, people don't talk about the secrets. They don't talk about the parallels with real world society and history. Like, the clear influences from a Jewish folklore that are incorporated in the game in a very memorable, interesting way. The ties to, like, post-Japanese World War II Japan. Like, there's so much cool stuff here that I don't see enough people talking about. In a way, it's kind of funny to me how the game is most well known for its absolute bullshit. The worst thing about it, like, it launched on PlayStation and not Nintendo, like it should have. This should have been a Nintendo 64 game to begin with. Let's face facts. Like, the CG isn't necessary, right? Right? You could easily have put the entire game in an N64 cart, right? There's no reason. There was no reason for the platform shift. If anything, it just led to the decline of Final Fantasy as a whole. And you can sort of see that. Like I said, this isn't as good as Final Fantasy VI. And a big reason for that is they stripped away a lot of the difficulty and the gameplay in favor of, like, story elements and a more, like, mature tone. In a lot of ways, that does work. It did a lot to bring in a new audience, right? Like, this game had a massive marketing budget, and oddly enough, is the game that made Final Fantasy VII, like a household name of video game RPGs. But all in all, it's a step down from what came before. I don't think it's as good as 4, 5, or 6. I don't think it's as good as, like, some of the other Square Enix games from the 90s. I think a lot of the elements it introduced led to the decline of Square as a brand, right? Like, the CG cutscenes, which were so popular back then, led to the creation of Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, which of course led to the decline of which of course led to Squaresoft's bankruptcy, which led to the merger of Enix, which made both companies worse. Like, they haven't produced anything in the past 20 years of note other than like maybe Kingdom Hearts, maybe a couple of Dragon Quest games and re-releases. Like, it's been a disaster. Like, in a lot of ways, Final Fantasy VII is the end of an era, the end of classic SquareSoft, and the beginning of the bullshit era of that continues to this day of graphics and story over truly engaging, memorable gameplay. But it still does a lot of stuff right. There's still a lot of stuff here to be commended. It's still absolutely worth a playthrough, if only because like it's such a well-known, well-regarded game, and still widely superior to the sequel, to the remake sequel, the end of Evangelion, the rebuild of Evangelion sequel. I don't even know what to call that thing anymore because it's not a remake. But there's still plenty to like about this game, and there's plenty of reason to come back to it in 2021. I am happy to say it is now a Nintendo classic.